So a bit of a different video for me today. So I have got back about 2 hours ago from Horrified, which is a horror convention down at the Farnborough Exhibition Centre down in Surrey. So this is actually my first HorrorCon event, and it's one I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Mainly because, as you can see from the jumper, Robert Englund was the star guest for the weekend. And we'll come on to it, but I actually got to meet Robert today, which was very, very exciting. But I thought, you know, as this is my first HorrorCon, and actually for the UK, we don't get a lot of really good horror conventions. There are a couple of dotted about. They tend to be actually more in the north, so some in Scotland, some up there, but there's not a lot down here in London. So it was a chance for us to really get along and see some a pretty cool lineup of guests actually, and that's really what kind of got me in and maybe go down there today. So I wanted to do a quick review of what I thought and maybe some thoughts about what we'd like to see maybe in sort of future Horrified events. As I said, the event took place down at Farnborough Exhibition Centre next to the Airdrome, so I know it very well from as a kid. I used to go to the Farnborough Air Show a lot, mostly to collect stickers, not so much these days. And the Horrified event, I think I saw that get publicised at the end of last year, and it had Robert Englund. It had a number of actresses from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, including Amanda Wyss, Brooke Bundy, Brooke Thies. Who else? There was Lance Henriksen and some other people from the Aliens cast. You actually had a really good roster of the Hellraiser actors, including Claire Higgins, and you even had Jodie Lynn O'Keefe from Halloween H2O. So I was pretty impressed actually with the lineup of guests. I think there was enough to warrant that trip down there. I think my only caution is I don't really know how they're going to top that. My understanding is that a lot of the event was built around this relationship with Robert Englund, and I think he was just such a massive draw that they're really going to have to just keep that going. I think America is so lucky they've got access to such a volume of people that they really can kind of drag out, whereas to get people to fly to the UK, I think it's quite difficult. So I think on the guest front, the organisers did a really good job, but I do think they maybe have backed themselves into a corner because, we're going to have, we were saying on the way home, maybe a Heather Langenkamp or Danny Lloyd or the twins from The Shining or Bruce Campbell, someone like that, to make next year's event as big as Robert Englund, because he's kind of the OG. Like, he's the only real horror icon that's pretty much consistently being played by him in a sort of recognisable way. Because your Michael Myers, your Jason Voorhees, they've been played by a number of different actors. It could be any of them. Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger. I'm going to keep with the positives because I don't want to say I have negatives. I think this was the first event of its kind, and there were more tweaks. There were things that I would probably suggest could be done differently, and we'll come on to that shortly. I actually think the strength of the show, guests aside, was the market. So I was really impressed by just the breadth of vendors and items on sale and the kind of things you could go look at. We must have gone back to that market, I think, about 4 or 5 times throughout the day. Whenever you were having a bit of an energy lull or you wanted to go and see something, you go around the market and there was always something new, some really cool collectibles, but also some really fun and cool independent stalls that were selling things that I've never seen before. So actually, one of the ones I really wanted to shout at, and I didn't tell them I'd do this, but I will, is a company called Lawn of the Dead. I asked them whether the name came first, and I think they said yes. And they made these concrete lawn ornaments, and they were all hand-painted, and I just thought that was a really cool concept. But, the market itself was really big. You had probably about 50 to 60 different stalls selling loads of different really cool stuff. And I think the organisers did a really, really good job at filling that hall with some really interesting, unique items, different things. It wasn't all just horror memorabilia. And I can't credit them for that because it really gave the event a bit of heart. And then I think as well, just being in that HorrorCon environment and seeing people dressed up, there were loads of Art the Clowns. I mean, Art the Clown was pretty prevalent. There were a number of different arts dotted around the venue. And then naturally, because Robert Englund was there, and I pretty much did the same in my quite low-key way, was lots of Freddy Kruegers just kind of hanging about. So that was really, really good. There will be a few grumbles online about kind of how it was organised and I paid for a photo shoot, and I'll show you the picture at the end. But when I paid for a photo shoot, and you can see for yourself how that came out, I was very happy with that. Robert didn't have a lot of time to really engage, but there were some really good talks on the stage, so we all got time to sit and listen to Robert talk about his career. So yeah, I think the queuing potentially was quite confusing. There were a couple of hour-long slots for Robert Englund throughout the day, which never felt like enough. So I think we were all a bit nervous that I don't think I'm going to get my photo shoot, or maybe I'll just get the money refunded. It was just through luck that we were in the market, and a friend of mine said, my friend Mark basically had said, the queue's here and it's just started, I've saved a space for you. So we ran over, and then I think we were probably about the 30th people in line to get through that shoot. But I could sense online in the hall there was a bit of frustration around being able to get autographs, being able to book on the day. I think some people probably were driven down and then found out that they couldn't get autographs with Robert because his time was so taken up. So I think there's probably a little bit of work to do in that. I also think we immediately ran to the kind of photo shoot area to get in line for Robert, not realizing that was the line for the Aliens one, which was come before. So it was kind of difficult to know, well, I want to start queuing up now because I want to be at the front of the line, but I couldn't because the line didn't exist yet because it was the last one. So I just think there's probably some logistics and things they'll probably work out over the course of the next year if there's another one to maybe just refine that slightly and improve communication. I paid something like £80 for that photo shoot. Maybe I expected an email from them to say, hey, this is what you need to do. Go to the photo booth at this time. I was expecting maybe a time slot. It seemed to just be a little bit kind of casual. So that was quite interesting. And on another front with the queuing, actually something that worked out for us, but I can see why it'd be controversial, but I kind of like that they did it. They had all these horror talks throughout the day. So Robert Englund did some, they had the cast of Aliens, they had the Elm Street women. But the way it works is if you got into one, they made you leave in between each one. So in a way it was good because you couldn't just go in and plonk yourself at the front and then just hang out there all day. You had to go. So we were in this, I would say, probably one of the weaker kind of talks was a horror makeup one, mostly because the sound setup wasn't brilliant. And if you were sitting further back, you couldn't really hear a lot. And I think sound systems, distance away from the market and the crowds would really, really have helped. So I'm hoping that they make a bit more use of the room next year and just maybe get a slightly better sound system. It was very echoey, and the space that we were in was an aircraft hangar. So again, it made it quite difficult. But we were quite lucky because we left that horror makeup exhibition and Robert Englund was there. So we left early. We had someone behind us say, hey, we get kicked out after this. And we just legged it. We we got almost to the front of the queue. We ended up in about row 4 for that really special half an hour with just Robert talking. I say just Robert, and that's probably another area where I think the event could really do with, I think the area could really do with a host or a compere of some kind. So with Robert, basically a sound tech guy just came out and said, hey, it's who you were waiting for, Robert Englund, with not a lot of fanfare. And then he just came out and it was straight into a Q&A because there was no comparing. There was no one to kind of set the scene or sit him down. And, you normally have someone that asks a few really key questions that they've planned in advance so you get some good stories. It relied on the audience immediately having questions, which, I don't know, I would have quite liked and felt a bit more at ease with someone there to maintain it. And actually, I think you could have done with a host or two just keeping the whole day together and moving things along. That would have given it a bit of presence. Like, go and get a really good horror drag queen or a really good YouTuber. Like, I would do it for free. If they said, we're going to go out and get horror YouTubers to come and be the hosts, I would happily do that for free if I got some backstage time to meet some of the celebs that were there. And it happened as well with the Elm Street women that the sound check guy, bless him, it wasn't necessarily his job, but he came out and said, hope you've got lots of questions, and the audience had just arrived. So we were kind of like, no. And then he went and said to the women off stage, oh, they've got no questions for you. And it just made it feel quite awkward. So I just think, just get a couple of compares and a couple of hosts. They could be walking around the venue in sort of more dead times, walking around the fair. There's something you can do with that. And I think just that slight awkwardness, you could feel that as you came in. I really think there was a bit of staging missing. So a a little bit of a smoke machine or a little bit of horror music as you go in. You walked into the venue and it was dead. There was no music. It was really quiet. You went straight into a canteen area. There was a sort of a horror maze, but it looked a bit kind of hastily thrown together. And actually, there must be some horror maze companies. You could probably get them to come along and set up in the building, and maybe, then they could provide another thing to do. And believe me, if the organisers are watching this, you've probably been through a lot of the planning on this and decided certain things aren't viable. So I'm not saying that I know better. I'm just thinking these are the things that I felt were missing. So great if you can add them. If you're like, we tried that and it's not going to work, I get it. It's the first event of its kind. We don't have a lot of stuff like this, so it's hard to template it. I think the last thing that I would say in terms of criticisms was you had to buy a lot of the stuff, like your autographs and your diamond passes and your photo shoots in advance. Clearly on the day, I think I would like to have made a few impulse purchases with the autographs, but the way it was set up was a big table, and then you had to go to somewhere else and buy the autograph, then you had to get back into a queue. I felt really bad for Jodie Lynn O'Keefe because it felt like no one was ever at a booth. But I do think she probably went in at too high a price point. I think they were £30 an autograph. By the end of the day, I would have just said, just knock the prices down, because the hall really started to clear out at about 4 o'clock. And there was an opportunity there just to make some quick money. I would love to have gone up and said hi and had a quick chat and maybe got an autograph, but I wasn't going to pay £30 for quite a minor horror star. But I really felt sorry for her. She wasn't getting a lot of that attention. A lot of the attention really was on Robert and Lance Henriksen. So that was just one more thing where I'd almost say if they could have a pay point, I could walk up and say hello and tap, and then get an autograph and have a quick chat while they're doing it. That would make it feel a bit more impulsive. I probably would have spent more money if that had been the case, because I'd have been like, yeah, go on then, 10 quid for that or 20 quid for that. But the thought of having to go somewhere else, buy it and come back, I think that put a lot of people off. And you could see the queue for Robert, and it made people think, well, I'm not joining that because it's going to take me hours to get anywhere. And it wasn't totally clear how that came together. But look, Horrified was really, really fun. I think there was so much to like about it, and it's just staging. It's small tweaks, I think, that if we were going to do it next year, would just really elevate it and just make it feel a bit more atmospheric. You could even host it in a more October time when it's wintry and you've got that kind of Halloween backdrop. I think April, Easter weekend was maybe a slightly odd timing, but hey, we've got a long weekend, so it can't be all bad. So I would definitely go back. I obviously would have to decide that based on who they get talent-wise, but we don't get a chance in the UK to just get this level of talent. I got to ask Amanda Wyss a question from Nightmare on Elm Street, which I'll throw at the end of this video, and it was really magical, and actually that was a time when it wasn't that busy. So I would recommend it. Obviously by the time you see this video it's going to be finished, because it actually took place over this Easter weekend, the 19th and the 20th of April, and I will update the channel if I see adverts for it again, because it'd be interesting to see what kind of talent they got. As I said, they've got Nightmare on Elm Street, Aliens. I didn't mention The Descent. They actually got most of the cast of The Descent. So there are a whole load of more niche or less well-known horror franchises and films that they could get the stars from. So I have high hopes. I really hope it's back. This is not meant to be a criticism. I just think it's things that they could do slightly differently. But it was a really fun day out. I think we're all knackered. And as I said, I got a picture with Robert Englund, which is coming up now. And if it happens again, I will see you at the next Horrified.
Right. So for Brook and Brook, you joined the franchise when it was already a bit of a beast, I think. For Amanda, I think you might be the first victim, I think, of Freddy. So what was it like for you filming this quite low-budget horror film and then going off set? What was the journey then like of realising that it was actually going to become this big global phenomenon?
Well, interestingly enough, I wasn't one of the people in the first one who knew it was going to be a big success, and partly because my agents forbade me to do it. They said it was going to ruin my career, don't do it, and I really liked Wyss and I did it. So I just assumed my agents were right and it was going to ruin my career and no one was going to see it. So I was totally wrong I didn't know what was happening. But that year when it came out, I was at my mom's house on Halloween handing out candy, and when I knew it was a success was a whole bunch of little Freddies came to the door. And I was like, no way! And I said to one parent, I was like, I was in that movie, I played Tina, and they were like, no you didn't. And then they all walked away, and I was like, I was in the movie! But that's when I knew. I was like, if they're selling Halloween costumes, we're on to something. And then I was like, so.